if you want to generate cash flow in a major way, that really comes down to three assets. One is real estate. Not everybody loves it. When people tell you it's a passive income, it's usually pretty active. The second is really intellectual property, but you got to obviously have intellectual property to share with the world. You have unique insights and gifts and talents and abilities that can really help people to navigate all the chaos that's out there in a myriad of topics. But the third one is the one I want to focus on today, which is business. When we look at most of the wealth that's built in the world, it comes from those three major assets. Now, I know a lot of people just set it and forget it and put their money in the stock market, but the stock market's a pretty efficient market. So it's limiting on what your returns can be. I mean, where you're going to put money in the stock market and expect a 50% rate of return in a year, that's going to be an anomaly, where maybe a small business with someone with the right insight and knowledge can get major returns in a shorter period of time when they understand how to navigate that world. So I'm bringing in Walker because he wrote the book Buy Then Build, which I don't know who was the first one that endorsed it. I had to be early. Maybe I was late because it took me a long time.
You were right up there. I mean, you read the first draft,
and I read the whole thing.
The plane. Thank you.
Yeah, which I don't read a lot of books, so that's that's one thing, and I won't endorse something I haven't read all the way through. So I was glad to endorse it. I actually bought a bunch of copies. We started giving it to clients, and I didn't realize it was going to be this, industry defining, and be the category king. Just because I didn't think of that you were going to put that kind of effort into this, dude. It takes some serious effort, I was like, damn, that's pretty good. Especially because our first interaction was you making fun of me. So that's fine.
It was an honest question, Garrett, right? I had just read What the Rockefellers Do, and I knew Garrett was coming to town to speak, and I offered to pick him up at the hotel and take him to the event, and he got in the car, and after maybe 1 minute of rapport building, I was like, so are you basically like an insurance salesman? It's a fair question,
which is how I did get my start.
Yeah.
I sold insurance from 1998 to 2005, 2006, and then after that I just referred it all out. But yeah,
and there's no shame in it either. It's like your what you engineer in your whole life policies is nothing short of brilliant. So yeah, I was just kind of thinking is this what drives Garrett's economic engine?
Right. And at the time I really had this coaching program and was making my money on coaching fees, right, and consulting. But let's talk about the book. Let's talk about business acquisition. One of the things you say in it is most people could actually acquire a business for a similar down payment that they would have on buying a home.
Yep.
And I don't think a lot of people think of it that way.
Yeah. So a lot of things led up to actually writing the book, right? I mean, I first got the idea of writing Buy Then Build back in between 2002 and 2004. I started my first business search in 2004, bought my first business in 2006. But the book wasn't published until 2019, right? And I bought 7 companies in that period and had my first exit and my second exit, and low 7-figure exits. I'm not just base hit kind of stuff. But along the way, I joined the Entrepreneurs Organization and was sort of introduced to Vern Harnish's work. And what I realized was the first company I bought was $8 million in revenue, and coming out of B school, you just thought okay, this little $1 million company is so small, it's ridiculous. We have no interest in that. It's not even on the map. But once I started learning from Vern, I realized that only 4% of companies in the United States ever exceed $1 million in revenue. It's actually an extremely low bar to be extremely exceptional, right? And then I realized, okay, well, all these companies that we know 1 out of 10 startups kind of makes it, right? We all know that adage. What we don't realize is that of that 10%, only 4% of that 1% achieves $1 million in revenue. And if you're less than $1 million in revenue, that's not, Garrett, that's not a business. It is, but it's not product market fit. It's not there's teams. There's not systems and profits and things. It's more one man show. So we don't start our company because we want to make $100,000 a year, right? Which is great, but that's not why we're going rogue and starting a business, right? So I realized that it's a pretty low watermark. And then with, all of the bank debt available and all the rest of it, you can actually buy one of these companies with 10% down, right? And then take the rest as a bank loan, which wipes out having to give away equity and doing all the raises and all the benefits of that. But because you're doing 10% down on maybe $1 million, $1.5 million, transaction, you're talking about with less than $100,000, you very realistically can buy one of the largest companies in the country, if not the world, which was just sort of we need to put this in perspective so people can understand it.
And so, it's interesting because people are putting their money in stocks that they don't know anything about the companies. And they have no relationship to creating cash flow with it or mitigating risk or having knowledge. I really have this belief that if we can increase our ability, if we could increase our skill set when we're making an investment, that's a real investment. When we don't, we're actually taking far too much risk and it's speculation.
Yep.
And unfortunately or fortunately, like there is a formula to business. And when I say unfortunately, is sometimes that takes the artistry and the excitement out of it, but at the same time, it creates a lot more predictability that if you know certain things, it's kind of like when I was talking to you yesterday, there's certain ways when you look at a business, you just kind of know what to look for, how to navigate it, where the pitfalls might be, where the revenue engines can be improved. Like it's not that sexy after you've done it for a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, I've probably bought a company in every single industry that I can think of. And that's a big statement. I shouldn't go
Porn?
that broad.
I didn't know that you were doing that, man. That's crazy.
What do you think this is? But just stay to the end. But the thing is every time you buy one of these smaller companies, you always have employees that are like, oh, okay, listen, I know you're like this like big entrepreneur and like you've done this at other places, but like what you're wanting to do doesn't work here. This industry is different. And everyone always kind of says the same thing, right? So for me, it's always about...
Is that just a human desire to be different? Or is it worry about losing a job?
I think it's almost like the grass is always greener kind of thing. Like, because you understand that everyone understands the behind the curtain insights to their own company. And you don't always realize the behind the curtain insights to the other companies, right? And like, whatever company you own, you always like kind of usually think about like, wow, my customer actually has like a better business than I do. Or like, wow, my supplier actually has a better business than I do. And you're always thinking about where you are in the kind of mix, right? So there's probably some desire to be different, but I think that most people aren't MBAs. They're, they don't have like all the frameworks of business. They haven't gone out and manage teams and like, learned like this business and that business and what grows and what builds efficiencies and all the rest of it. And I think a lot of these are really just common denominators, and a lot of businesses that don't have infrastructure in them sort of are built organically. And then everyone kind of just has the way that it works. Because as you know, small business is just chaos. Like everyone's just running around like doing whatever needs to get done.
Putting out fires.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, you're like, well, okay, we got it done. Or not, unfortunately, but like, so, once you go in and start to put in systems and processes, everyone thinks they're not going to work.
Yeah. Okay. There's the systems. Is it because they like doing it the way they like doing it?
Look, I think so.
I mean, because it sounds like this is the common denominator.
Yeah. I mean, like, okay.
And how much resistance does that create in implementing what you want to implement when you buy?
Yeah. So at the macro level, right? I feel like every business, when you are analyzing it for potential acquisition, like just use like Porter's 5 forces and look at it and be like, okay, where's the power in this situation?
The Porter model is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's what is it? Supplier power, customer power,
distribution,
ease of entry, right? Competitors,
yep.
Whatever. But the thing is like, you can look at a business model and figure out, okay, where's the opportunity here and where's the risk and where's, and so the business will usually tell you where the opportunity is. And sometimes it's revenue generation, marketing, leading out a B2B sales team. Other times it's like, okay, this company has all the right things. It's just they don't know how to run a business. And so It's kind of like profit maximization, right? And as a result, I feel like every entrepreneur, you talk about this a lot with investor DNA, right? Like every entrepreneur is either a revenue generator or a profit maximizer, okay? And so what you have to do is look for that business that lines up with the skill set that you have, and then like that's your growth opportunity.
So revenue generator is like a rainmaker?
Yeah.
Like someone that could just bring in the business.
It could even be like someone who's really great at online marketing, right?
Okay.
Like it could be like, okay, there's no marketing systems here, right? Like we need to build out some kind of funnel, and then we'll fill, like for example, at my railing company, all right, we're at Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri, and the people that actually have money at Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, live in St. Louis or Kansas City or Springfield or maybe Jefferson, somewhere around, and then they have a second home at Lake of the Ozarks, and they all have boats. Okay. And the sun like destroys the boats. Like, so you have to like get this really expensive, like custom fit thing, or you can buy from us this like very little product that we made that's like super cheap, where they're just like dock curtains. So we'll come out and do custom built dock curtains right on your deck and protect your boat. And it's like cheap, affordable, like whatever. But it's because
What's the difference between cheap and affordable?
well, these custom boat, yeah, great.
Yeah.
But like it's one of these where I ended up being like, all right, we're going to target people in St. Louis, Kansas City that were just at Lake of the Ozarks, and we're going to run an email funnel. And it was almost like ClickFunnels. It's like they go to this thing and it's like, hey, here's your problem. We can like solve this. Here's your alternative. Like pay this much or pay this. And then it goes to a video of like my manager and he's like, here's how you measure. And then they get on a sales call. Then we get a guy out at their property, right? And that guy at their property is selling the railing that all of these houses have. So it's like, it's the bigger ticket thing, right? And this is just an example I'm just pulling out of thin air, but it's one of these where,
revenue.
Yeah, it's like because it's a D2C kind of business, it just like online marketing really worked for it.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then profit maximization is someone that knows to improve the margins, or give me the distinction between revenue generator and profit maximizer.
Yeah, profit maximizer is sort of like bottom up, right? Like you look at the P&L and you start with net and start going up, right? So gross margin's the big one you pointed out, right? So it's sort of like if you can get discounts from your suppliers, or you know where to get it cheaper.
You might have programs that don't belong anymore. They're not doing enough. Yeah.
Totally. You might have dead weight in the business. I bought a company once because I could tell that the operator was the problem. And at first I was really turned off by it. And then I was sitting there with the owner and I was looking at the P&L and I just kept asking him questions. And it was clear like his operations manager had quit 14 months prior. And there was like $1 million tied up in him just spending shit trying to figure out what to do.
Right.
And it was like, okay. So it's a pretty clear, opportunity, but it was all about like, okay, how we can just increase the margins right away. And what that does, Garrett, is like, it's sort of like a value add on real estate. It's like, okay, I can buy this thing that should be worth $100, but I can buy it for 70. And then just by like knowing how to run a business, you can sort of like get it back up to what it's worth. Right.
So you've bought all these different categories of businesses.
Yeah.
What ones do you like? Which ones would you prefer not to buy?
Yeah.
You talked about the Porter criteria, but what other kind of things do you look for?
I think I personally find that I'm not really great at
At sentences?
At sentences. Thank you. Okay, here's the thing. When I look at my own skill set, that's what's going to define this, right? Like number one, you have like your sort of interest. Like, am I at a cocktail party and do I have interest in what I'm telling people that I do, right? I mean, that's kind of level one, right? Like people are like, oh, go buy laundromats. And I'm like, if I bought it,
you don't want to talk about a laundromat.
I mean, I would blow my brains out if I had to sit in a laundromat. I just hate it. And it's kind of a popular topic, and I don't even think it's a business. It's real estate, really, which is it's still viable. Like it's great, but like not an entrepreneur business. But the point is like you got to love what you're doing, so you have to have interest in it. But I think that when I look at me and my skill sets, one of the things that I am just not natural at is sort of managing teams of people that have both like blue collar and white collar.
That makes it a little tough.
It's just hard because it's like you gain respect in different ways. And,
and you're too uppity for the blue collars.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But it's like you try to be inspiring in different ways, and you try to lead people in.
But
different
now
ways.
you have to be two different people almost to handle that and manage that process.
Yeah,
properly.
right. And then you get the.
How involved are you in once you acquire the business? Like how much of your time goes into that business?
Yeah.
And how long are you involved in that business even before you sell it?
Okay, different answers, of course, right? But like, what I would tell you is that I think it's a huge mistake. I mean, what we're talking about here is active investing versus passive investing, right?
Right.
And it's like, one of the things that, you helped confirm for me 10 years ago was that owning a business was game changing in terms of being able to build generational wealth for yourself, right? Yep. When I was growing up, my grandfather, Buy Then Build's actually dedicated to my grandfather. It's like your grandfather's entrepreneur, right? He would tell me, we'd sit down at breakfast, he'd be like, Walker, the only way to build real wealth for yourself is to own your own company, right? And then he would say something like, but don't start one because that's a bunch of bullshit. Like, just go buy a going concern. So he was telling me this.
Which I love, because I don't think a lot of people, if they were just like, hey, what do you want to do? They're going to think about starting versus buying if you just survey a bunch of people. So I love that you brought this to the world and the attention on acquisition, because it seemed like acquisition was something for the big boys, right? Like it's like an oligarchy. It was like you had to have a certain amount of money or a certain amount of credibility or a certain amount of relationships. And people are thinking about publicly traded companies or Buffett buying out enough of the stock to be the main shareholder with Berkshire, instead of looking at there's tons of businesses that are doing more than $1 million in revenue, which is still the minority of those businesses that you could acquire for a similar amount to a down payment on a home. I think that's such a, like, you brought that concept to me. Like, when I read it, I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy, because I started my own business from scratch, right? And then built it that way.
I'm really just a terrible
I did buy
entrepreneur.
a business, though, after meeting you, so that's good. Yeah.
How'd it work out?
Really good. I merged my existing business into it, and it was a good idea. I bought a distressed business and acquired a team, essentially, that was fantastic.
Perfect.
And we were starting to be able to produce digital content and sell that digital content, where before we were all pretty much one-on-one, so it created a different level of scalability.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I think it's one of these things where it was also unsexy, right? Like, at the time, you got to think about it. Like, I'm literally having pancakes with my grandfather, and he's telling me to buy businesses in the 80s, okay? He bought a feed company, and then he bought, like, an aluminum filter company, like this kind of crap, right? Like, in the meantime, as I was, like, when I was in college, like, when I was a sophomore in college, I got a cell phone for the first time and an email address and, like, a laptop. So, like, the world was, like, going internet
hard. I had a beeper
hard.
my freshman year. I had a beeper.
Do you still have a beeper?
No.
Yeah. Just for that side hustle.
Super cool. Yeah. That side hustle. Do drug dealers still have beepers?
I mean, that shit we had right before we started is great, Garrett. You really need to get that on the market.
Yeah.
So, were those peptides?
I don't know that you snort peptides, do you?
But it's one of these where the internet was emerging right as I was coming out of college, right? So it was not like the 70s anymore. Like, I don't know what was going on in the 70s in terms of cool shit, but internet businesses were all the rage. They were getting spun up, right? I mean, like, you had the whole tech boom and bust and kind of boomish, climb again. Silicon Valley was forming, and Silicon Valley was owning it was a monologue, right? It was the story of the entrepreneur. Like, unicorns were getting Amazon, all these companies, right? And so then I went to business school, and, all the startups so they had just started the entrepreneurship program at the Olin School of Business, which is where I went. Today it's like #1 entrepreneurship program, which is unbelievable considering it's in St. Louis. But, many years in a row, Garrett. But it's because I taught there. But anyway, so I really turned that school around.
That was the thing that happened.
I really turned that school around. Yeah. So I did teach entrepreneurship through acquisition there. But anyway, so the dialogue around entrepreneurship, around turn of the millennium and the following decade, was 100% around super sexy software, e-com, right? Like, all of these, like, lightweight entrepreneur business models. And, I remember going to an event after I graduated from business school, and I was sitting next to this guy, and he just looked very, very content with his life. And at the time, I was thinking to myself, like, all of the, like, in St. Louis, there's, like, this neighborhood, Ladue, right? And it's not even, like, in Ladue, it's, like, one of the top 10 richest neighborhoods in the country, okay? And right next to it is Clayton, which has to be, like, also right there. Like, real estate's more expensive in Clayton. Anyway, I'm sitting there with this guy, and none of these people have these, like, sexy Silicon Valley businesses. I sit next to this guy. He's very comfortable. And I'm like, what do you do? And he's like, I make light fixtures. And I was like, okay, like, what kind? And he was like, well, you see those, what are those called? Those dome lights or
cans? I don't know.
Can lights. Yeah, he's like, I make the plastic thing inside that holds the can light. And I was like, okay. How many companies do that? And he was like, 2. And I was like, oh, got it.
Yeah. So,
and it was just this sort of realization of, like, that's a completely unsexy, sickly profitable business. And I had this guy in the entrepreneurs organization that was like, Walker, have you ever started a business and like you're so passionate about it and like you can't get it off the ground, you can't get it profitable, and it's just eating cash and it just wears at your soul until you shut it down? And then you have another business that you're like, okay, I guess that's an opportunity, and you just like throw $5 at it and all of a sudden something's happening, and then you get really passionate about it and you go all in on this thing that you weren't excited about. And that's what I realized, that I was destined to own a can light business, which I don't. But it's all about focus
Drapes
on the
for
profits.
boats.
Yeah. Right. Focus on the profits, and the passion comes pretty quickly, because you can build and morph that company into its image of you and what you want to do with it.
Got it. So you've done different categories.
Yeah.
What ones are you still involved in?
I actually still love e-commerce. Okay. Okay. Get it. Okay. Here's the thing. It's all about me, right? Is what your question is. And for me personally, I like fewer employees. And people that want to buy a manufacturing company, which I've done twice, there's a certain blood that they have where they're like, this is me. Like, I need to see things moving through big machines and like whatever. And it's like, great. That's not the thing that really gets me going. And I'm more of a revenue generator, I think, right? And so it's like I'm really good at sales. I'm really good at understand marketing and overall business strategy, and I'm also very good looking, Garrett. But so my mom tells me.
You have just the right amount of gray hair. Like, it's very nice hair.
But I tend to really enjoy companies that have fewer employees. So if I look at even the last 3 companies I bought, it's like a content site, okay, with 1 employee, okay. Not even I have a partner who runs it and then does all the content, and like an SEO contractor. And then I have a software company that I bought, 1 owner with some contractors. That was it. And then the one before that was e-com. I bought an e-com business, maybe 2 e-com businesses in there. So like, as you go to scale what it is you're doing, like it's really popular right now. Like this is a whole different topic, Garrett, but like,
that's fine.
But like, I hate it when people get on Twitter and they start learning about buying businesses, and it quickly leads them to like the holdco concept. And they all want to be Warren Buffett all of a sudden. And it's like, I wanted to be Warren Buffett in 2013 to 2017. Like, I did that. And I learned a lot of big lessons, right? And it's not about quantity.
It's not about quantity.
It's not about quantity at all. And so it's all about, how do you scale what it is that you're doing, right? And I think that people are really attracted to this holdco model because they're like, oh, I can just scale by buying 16 businesses this year instead of just buying 1 and focusing and building like cash. Your original question was, do I work in these businesses after I buy them? And my answer, Garrett, is yes. Like, I do not think that, I think it's so asinine to buy a company and then like replace yourself and the seller as an operator, because now you have no understanding of how that business works, right? And so you're making like probably one of the biggest financial decisions of your entire life, and then you're handing over responsibility to somebody that doesn't have equity or personally guaranteed debt usually.
The narrative became, oh, I don't have time, I'm too busy.
Yeah.
Or I want passive income, which is for most people income that passes them by because they're not paying attention to it.
Nice.
And unfortunately, that narrative that we don't have the skill sets, we're not smart enough, other people can do it better, I don't have the time. Like, there's all of this kind of limited belief system that leads people towards this. Yeah. Yet they kind of want the bragging rights of saying they own multiple businesses.
Yep.
And look, I made this mistake. I owned so much real estate. I was launching so many businesses when I was in my 20s because I just had a lot of success early on. And that success bred ignorance in a way that I just started thinking I can just do it all.
Yep.
But then when one thing stopped working,
the
other things got neglected.
That's it.
And then they started to suffer.
That's it.
And I was always on this, I want multiple streams of income. But the problem is I'd rather have a river of income.
Yes.
And when that river is like, okay, this thing's so powerful and it's good to go, then it's okay to create and work on a stream.
Yeah.
But if we prematurely diversify, then we get in a worse situation. And often that has a lot more to do with bragging rights. And I love that you shared the story of the guy that like, oh, you see these the plastic and the like. It's like, how many companies do that too? Yeah. Okay, that guy's done something substantial by not being overly distracted, or and that's a tough thing, because I think for entrepreneurs it's hard to discern the difference between an opportunity and a distraction. Like every distraction is disguised as this an amazing opportunity that's seductive and it sounds great and it's romantic and it's like, yeah, this is going to be awesome. And then we don't think about anything that could potentially go wrong. Maybe we have a health challenge, or we need to pay some attention to family because they're going through something, or we get a cash flow crunch. And that being overly optimistic isn't optimism. It's actually ignorance.
Yeah.
And so I think that I am not as focused as I could be in my life. I get excited about things. It's hard to say no sometimes. I've gotten better at it over time, but at the time, I remember one of my friends, he did really well in real estate, and he was a contractor and developer. And I showed him like the different ways I had money coming in. He's like, dude, mine's just so much more simple than that. And I was like, to have a contractor and developer tell you that theirs is simpler, I was like, maybe I'm doing this wrong. I just had too many things going on.
Yeah.
Instead of giving something my full attention. And so I don't know. Do you think that's just bragging rights? That revenue and number of companies and number of employees often could become a bragging right?
I think it comes down to, I looked at this and I looked into this recently, and it's like people that are brand new to an idea have an extremely high confidence rate. Okay. And then as you learn about that and you get more educated and experienced, your confidence starts to go down because you start to realize like, oh my God, there's so much I don't know. So you're like, I know this. I'm the effing master. Like I'll even coach you how to buy a business or whatever. I did it once, like a month ago. It's easy. Like, and then all of a sudden, like it starts, their confidence goes down, and then you bottom out, like almost when like the master is like challenging you the most. But if you stay at it, you then increase, right? And by the time you hit your 10,000 hours or whatever, your confidence for the first time is right back to where you were right at the beginning, right? And so it's like, I think that there's this, people don't understand what they're getting into, right? And I think that, I forgot the question.
Who should buy a business and who shouldn't buy a business?
Well, look, my target market has always been competent people, right? Like when I wrote Buy Then Build, I wasn't like, okay, I'm taking this mainstream, like Robert Kiyosaki, like everybody should buy real estate and like whatever. This is like, no.
Robert Kiyosaki or Kawasaki? Is he selling dirt bikes, or is he?
Thank you. But it's one of these where I made a conscious decision of like, okay, who am I going to sell this to? And I was really looking for middle managers in large organizations, like number 2 at the smaller business that's like help that guy make all this money. Competent people, people that kind of got their MBA 10 to 20 years ago, that like realized, oh, okay, I need to start my own business to get my own asset. But
because who's already started a business a lot of times are people that have overcome different ADD, dyslexia. You see a lot of entrepreneurs, they just become resourceful because they deal with stuff. So they tend to be more bold a lot of times.
Yeah.
But you have these people that are actually extraordinarily competent, but less bold, that could actually run a business, but they've felt safe within an organization.
It's also, buying an existing company is really the fastest way to like have a business that generates 6 figures for yourself.
Isn't it interesting that if we look at real estate, almost everybody's buying existing real estate.
Yeah.
Like most real estate investors.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
There are plenty of developers out there, but how many developers have you met versus real estate investors? It's like 10 to 1, right? It's yet in business, it's the opposite.
It's opposite.
It's like 10 are the startups and 1 is the person that's acquiring.
Yeah.
So I just want people to see that level of opportunity, and the opportunity that you talk about of how many people are selling their business because it's time to retire. Right. Because they're getting old. There's a huge number and a massive wealth transfer in that.
Yeah.
And so this is I would encourage people to really get the skill sets on this. Like when you think of investing, think about investing in your skill set to understand how business works, how you can provide value with the business, how the systems could occur. Like if you're not investing in that and you're just passively putting your money in a retirement plan at the expense of yourself, that's going to be hard to create a substantial legacy. And it's going to put you at risk because you're now going to be in a retirement where the entire outcome of your income is outside of your hands. It's all in what are interest rates and what's the market doing. And when I say the market, the stock market, which might not directly correlate to what a small business might be doing. So I just think that I'm urging people to invest in themselves to really figure this out. Read your book, Buy Then Build. It's a great blueprint essentially that it will help people understand whether it's for them or not.
Yeah.
And if it is for them, it gives them so much good insight along the way.
I remember what I was going to say earlier too, Garrett, which is about the confidence.
I have you at 7,000 feet, so I expect you to forget a few things here or there.
But it's like I was talking about the confidence, and you go.
Yeah.
When I first read the 4-Hour Workweek, right? When did that come out? I don't remember anymore. Like 02, so 04, somewhere in there. 2000
for sure, like 20 years ago.
So the point is, I read it and I was like, oh, 4-Hour Workweek, shit. Okay, I want 10 of those, right? Like I was like, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna have 10, right? And it's like
10 things I'm working 4 hours in.
But to your point
Back
with
to
your
40
friend,
hours. Yeah.
to your friend that was like, oh, my business is so much easier. Like Tim Ferriss in that book was like, oh, I just did all my work for the week real quick before I got on an airplane, right?
Yep.
And it's just sort of like, what are the choices that you want? And I think when you're in your 20s, you really have this like, there's this hustle culture, right? And it's like, okay, I need to go crush, and it's true. I'm sorry, you do. You need to go crush, right?
But like the weird thing about that culture is bragging about the amount of time spent versus how intelligent the time is.
It needs to be both, Garrett.
Right. But the thing is, I think that the problem is when people are in their 20s, they don't realize the damage they're going to do in their 30s and 40s if they don't create some level of depth in their life and intention.
Totally.
Because what I learned is when I went to Italy for a summer, my business was able to sustain without me. And I had to think for 18 months before I left how we could build the business that way. And most people become the bottleneck in their business because they love it. They want to do everything. They identify with it, so they don't want any bad press. And so they're just hustling all the time, which diminishes the ability of the people around them because nobody else is stepping up because that person's doing too much on their own and becomes that kind of constraint.
Did you unplug for a full month?
So I was there for 63 days, and I did 5 half days of work, 5 half days.
Okay.
Where I would just take a few phone calls, check in on a few things, and I was writing something. And it, sometimes I would write because I was awake and everybody else was still asleep.
And you're in Italy. Yeah.
And I'm in Italy, and with a cappuccino.
And you're a writer.
But yeah, really unplugged.
Wow.
Really did unplug.
I couldn't do that now.
And
I'm close, but not really.
Now I would definitely I'd have to. I don't have the cash flow I had then because I sold my business and I'm recreating that cash flow now, right?
That's who else should buy businesses. A successful entrepreneur who's sold their business. I'm so confident with their success because they already know how to operate a business.
Yeah, the business I bought in 2014, there's issues with it to a degree, but when I look at the team that was acquired and the capabilities that we had, and it was a good fit for what we had already created that they hadn't, and what they had created that we hadn't. We changed the name of our firm, made it kind of like a merger, but I'm the one that coughed up the money and built built that initial piece, and then I had a CMO all of a sudden. I had copywriters, I had it was just it was a really nice situation.
I think that we've got hustle culture on one side, right? But then on the other side, you've got this like, don't do anything, like free money, like no work, free money kind of sales pitch, right? And out of the two, I sort of favor hustle culture myself because that's how shit gets done. But I think that somehow
there's a middle road there. Is the deal.
Right. But somehow this
hustle culture is why you got people buying 7 businesses that really only should buy 1.
No, it's the other side, dude. I think like I think you're right, but it's like it's also it's both extremes, right? It's like the fundamentalists and the socialists. I don't know, whatever. But what's the other? California? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But like it's like can I say that? Can I say that on the internet?
I'm just gonna say
the internet's.
And I would just say this. I just went to New York, and it was a very pleasant trip, and
awesome,
very clean, and very different than my experience of when I was in LA the last time.
Yeah, got it.
So,
we'll leave it at that. But you've got this like no money down. Like somehow the internet picked up on buying businesses after Buy Then Build came out. Let's be honest, and has sort of taken it mainstream, like higher up the funnel, where it's like, hey, let me introduce you to this. And it's a lot of like, no money down, don't do any work, replace yourself with an operator. I can't imagine a worse decision. Like the whole point of buying a business is because you need to be an entrepreneur fundamentally.
But once you have that skill set, things might shift. Let me give an example. So I had this mentor, he had a holding company. I mean, I'm not really like of the holding company philosophy. I mean, I have an intellectual property company that owns my interest in other companies, but I'm saying, is it cohesive to my vision? Does it matter to me? Is it work that I'm compelled to do? Like, I'm at that phase of life where I wouldn't want to buy a business, even if it was profitable, if it doesn't mean that I'm writing more, performing more, connecting with fascinating relationships. Like, I don't want to do it. And even if it had promises of huge returns, I've turned those down over time, and I feel good about that because they all come with the cost of energy and time. But so he was having lunch every month with this billionaire, and Phil Romano was the billionaire. And Phil had this idea, and he's like, "Hey, do you know anyone that could run this?" And he's like, "No, but if I ever find someone, I'll let you know." They have lunch the next month. He's like, "How's the idea going?" And Phil's like, "Well, I'm looking for someone that would run it." Now, Phil was already a billionaire, so I think finding a CEO that could run this idea might make a lot of sense because he made most of his money.
Sure.
Because someone that invented the stint was golfing with him, and he figured out how to get the distribution into all the hospitals. It took him very little time to make hundreds of millions of dollars.
Got it.
Right? So like there's a certain amount of relationship capital, there's a certain amount of like collaboration that can really create a pretty amazing situation, but there's also complexity in collaboration, as you know and I know, with partnerships and things like that there's the good and the bad of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Yeah, I think that just buying a business, like you're saying, and immediately planning on checking out and just putting someone in there, that seems like the way most people invest that don't do well investing.
Yeah.
They don't have the skill set. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the network. And they're like, "Oh, cool, we're just going to do this and it's going to work out." Well, if this is someone that's, I have a client that's bought a lot of businesses over time, but it's all related to what his skill set is. And all 9 of the businesses, he has like a face of each of those businesses, but he can then use the way that he knows how to market, manage the list, and cross promote. And like, he's just absolutely crushing it and done so well. And when I first met him, he had money in mutual funds. I was like, "Why are you in this mutual fund?" He's like, "I don't know." I'm like, "What's it done for you?" He's like, "Not much." And I was like, "What else could you do?" I mean, it's a completely transformed situation of investing. So yeah, he has 9 businesses over like a 15-year period of time.
Right.
They're all profitable. They all support each other. And it's all a formula that he's really good at,
Yeah.
And even though he doesn't work a ton, he used to work a ton, and now he has all the skill sets and the infrastructure and the systems, and they complement. And so if there isn't a system there, you're going to have to spend a lot of time. That's the bottom line, right?
Because he stacked them. Yeah.
Right.
So you don't want to buy a company that takes effort away from, let's call it, Garrett's core competency.
Right. And the thing is, even when I make investments, it's effort out of my core competency.
Right.
I've turned down investments that would probably do okay, but even if I have to do one meeting with an attorney to review the contract, and then I have to sign the contract, and then I have to get the reports, like, that's all going to take space in my life.
You
and
won't
I have
do
to,
that.
No, absolutely. Because here's the thing. I define wealth as a life well lived. And so I'm like, okay, so let's say that makes me an extra $1 million by making an investment. Let's say that investment's a 500% return over 10 years.
Yeah.
I have to look and say, what did that 500% cost me in quality of life?
Yeah.
In mental capacity? Like, because, dude, if I'm writing a blog every week, if I'm filming all these videos, if I'm performing my theatrical keynote or corporate comedy or writing another book, like, how am I going to take any time to do any of that stuff without having it interfere with flow? Because those things require a lot of attention. And so I'm like, what are they going to bring me? Are they going to bring me a private jet? I mean, if it brings me a private jet, then I guess I will start to consider it. But otherwise, I'm going, it's just going to cost me too much. It's the cost is so high. But would I buy a business that complements what I'm doing? Absolutely.
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 So attitude, aptitude, and action, right? So aligning your core competency with the business that you're buying is the secret. In other words, I feel like as people approach buying a business for the first time, they usually are asking the wrong questions first. And what they're doing is they're evaluating a business that doesn't have them in it.
Right. And let's dive a little deeper on this on my side, and then you can. So I think that it begins with, what is money? Why is it important to you? What does it provide for you? And the thing is, when I was young, I wanted money because it provided respect. It provided like, hey, I'm smart enough to make this money. So I was looking for people to be like, oh, you're so great. Eventually, I healed the majority of that. I'm still a little fit. I still have, my moments. But so I'm like, well, what money is going to provide me is a quality of life and I want what the goods and services the money could provide, not the clout the money provides.
Yes.
Right? Because people already think I'm probably worth more than I am. So like, I don't even want
You're worth
that
a lot,
to be.
dude. I've seen it.
but what's important is like, who am I spending time with? What are the things that I'm doing? And I just find when I'm not excited about something, even if it's a good investment, even if it's someone I think that will probably do well with it, even the best intentions, I don't know what's going to happen in their life. I don't know who they're going to hire. I'm just taking on risks that I don't want to mitigate, manage, or control. But acquiring a business that supports my vision, like, yeah, let's do that.
Right.
Let's look for that.
All day long.
But see, it's money. Money's the real question. Like, how do you view money? If you view more money is always better, then you're likely to be susceptible to buy more businesses than you actually want or make more investments than you can actually manage. Because sometimes we have this notion that more is better. But as your friend that you sat down with, less was better because now all of a sudden he's one of two businesses in the country or on the planet that provides something. He doesn't go get distracted with it. Because, and here's the thing, the more successful you are, the more distractions are going to come your way. The more people are going to vie for your attention. The more people want you to invest in what they do. The more people are going to have these great ideas. But I don't have a lack of ideas, Walker. I don't sit around and be like, man, if I only had an idea. I have a abundance of ideas, and it's which ones I'm going to remove from my life. So now do I want other people bringing me their ideas of what my life should be?
Yeah.
See, I think that too many people aren't clear about what they want from life. So they chase a lot of things. And this is what we were talking about this morning on our walk is people think it's great to say they have 10 businesses, but how successful are those 10 businesses?
Sounds like a disaster.
Right. And how well will they manage that? Because look, when I owned too much property, I remember having a Super Bowl party at my house. I'm hosting it and I barely could enjoy the game because I'm like, oh, there's an issue with this tenant. This thing needs to close and we're finishing the building and we have to get off the construction loan to permanent financing and they're missing something. It was just like nonstop. And if I didn't answer, well, and even when I hired people, then I had to talk to them. It's just what I didn't want to do. So I learned a lot of lessons from that and say sometimes less is more and deeper is better than just distracted.
Yeah. I think that there's sort of like 3 levels.
Okay.
Like we're sort of totally bashing the like holdco model. Let's use that.
Look,
for this.
These big players could do a holdco model.
Yeah.
Or,
so I feel like level 1 is sort of like get started, right? It's like get an opportunity, look for an opportunity and get started and get your business, right? After that, you make mistakes, you learn, like you accidentally buy 6 companies and you shouldn't, or whatever the lessons are that you're going to learn.
Yeah, over 100 real estate properties was my lesson. I was like, oh God, this is painful.
Yeah, we were talking about that last night again. But like
You're still baffled that I have such a simplistic view of how I handle my assets.
I am. I was surprised. But it's so level 1 is like get started. Level 2 is almost like, I don't know, focus or momentum, right? And it's like you start to eliminate these things, right? Like you're a little ahead of me in level 2 in that I remember when I met you 10 years ago, you were like, when I first started, this is me imitating Garrett.
Okay.
When I first started, people would be like, what do you do when you're at work? And I'm like, business. And people are like, what's your hobby? And I'm like, business. And it's like, I feel like I still have some of that, right? Like it's hard for me to shed it, but it's really all about focus and building momentum around what it is that you do. You are a revenue generator in your ability to focus and develop exceptional IP. Okay. If you find a business that you can acquire where the difference between where it is now and what it could be is high level IP in your wheelhouse, you're not going to think twice. It's going to take you 5 minutes to make a decision because you know what value you bring, right? You know what you can do, and it's going to be the best investment you've ever made in your life. Then there's this sort of like level 3, okay? And level 3 is kind of your billionaire friend who is like, I'm buying companies and putting, it's the holdco model, right? Like the concept.
And he's established, so he has a different ability to do that.
Totally. It's what it is you're no longer playing the entrepreneur or the producer. You're playing capital allocator or executive producer. You're pulling a whole deal together and allocating capital. And the more of your own capital you can use, the more equity you're going to get, right? And if you can throw money at, if you can hire, the CEO of, Apple Computer, it's just Apple today. If you can hire Tim Cook away from Apple to like run your cell phone, whatever related company,
and
like you're going to be fine.
He's a profit maximizer, I guess, right?
I think he is. Yeah. I mean,
where I think that Jobs is probably a revenue generator.
Yeah. Jobs was a visionary, but he also had I don't know enough about the inner workings of Apple.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how he got all that shit done, but like, didn't you meet his neighbor?
Yeah.
What did he say?
He didn't know who they were talking about because the guy he met was an asshole. It's funny.
I mean, you read Walter Isaacson's biography, and it's like, Jobs had this.
Do you
reality.
read books that big? Because that's a big
Totally.
book. The only book I've read that big is Atlas Shrugged.
That's okay. I love.
Do you read for leisure?
Yes, totally.
So you're not totally a grind, hustle and grind guy.
I mean, I was an English major, so
how proud is your university that you wrote a book, English major?
My undergrad, I don't think they're aware. It was a business book. They don't know. But yeah, I mean, it always kind of was a goal of mine to write a book. So I don't know, whatever. But
and you wrote a great book.
Thanks, man.
Some people write a book and they call it a business card. I hate that because it feels like a business card.
Hate that.
I want a book that's really a book that I can
get
content from.
Right. I agree. And there's a lot of
I concur.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of companies out there that help entrepreneurs sort of write books, and I'm just like, this is terrible because it's like you're bringing down the average of what a book should be. But anyway, that's a different conversation. But
that's just a uppity.
We're two extremely great authors having fun on a Friday morning at Wealth Labs.
Well, great. So look, we've covered quite a few things. I think this is insightful on you can acquire a business without that much money down. What type of business you acquire really should look at your skill sets. And if you think it's going to be completely passive, that might be a problem unless you're already heavily established and have great infrastructure and have a team that you could kind of deploy. And really just, some good insights from Walker on that. I appreciate it.
Thanks, bro.
We got a lot more to talk about,
Can't wait.
a lot more, nuance to go into in this business world. But again, one of the big three, if you're willing to acquire businesses, I mean, it's a much more active, but there's a lot more opportunity. It's very tax efficient. We didn't even get into that. The more cash flow you can build over time that doesn't require your direct involvement, the more equity you'll have, which is another great situation. And you can make adjustments. If there's inflation, you have a way to battle back. If there's interest rate changes, you're in a much better position than someone that just hands their money over to someone that they then hands it over to someone else and they wait for 30 years hoping it's going to work out.